Welcome to the U.S.-China Global Education television series, presented by the Confucius Institute U.S. Center in partnership with the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. This 10-part series brings together presidents of universities and cultural institutions that host the Confucius Institute, along with distinguished American business, diplomatic, and educational leaders, to discuss the importance of global education, language development, and people-to-people exchange between the United States and China. My name is Tony Cully Foster, and I'm the President and CEO of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. Our focus is on global education, international affairs, and global communications. Like the Confucius Institute U.S. Center, we build educational bridges and advance international understanding between students, teachers, and professionals in the United States, China, and worldwide. We have a valued strategic partnership with the Confucius Institute U.S. Center. Their focus is on Chinese language development, global education, and people-to-people exchanges between the United States and China. It's my honor today to be here with my friend and colleague, Professor Gao Qing, the Executive Director of the Confucius Institute U.S. Center, who will introduce our program today.
Thank you, Tony. Today's interview takes place at the Juilliard School in New York City, which is the most prestigious art conservatory in the world. We are joined by two distinguished speakers, Dr. Joseph Polisi, the president of the Juilliard School, and Dr. Anthony Monaco, the president of Tufts University. Dr. Anthony Monaco is the 13th president of Tufts University. He received his education from Princeton University and then received his MD and PhD degrees from Harvard Medical School. Prior to his presidency at Tufts, Dr. Monaco served as Pro-Vice Chancellor at Oxford University. Dr. Monaco brings the Tufts presidency deep-rooted commitments to academic excellence, diversity, access, and inclusion, a global perspective, and a keen awareness of the power of higher education to impact individuals and society. The establishment of Tufts University's Confucius Institute reflects its global strategy. Now, let's join Dr. Monaco, who will begin this important dialogue.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Professor Gao. With me is Joseph W. Polisi. He's the 6th president of Juilliard School and started in September 1984. Previously, Dr. Polisi was Dean of the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, Dean of Faculty at the Manhattan School of Music, and Executive Officer of the Yale University School of Music. He holds a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from Yale, as well as a degree in Political Science from the University of Connecticut, and his most important degree in International Relations from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. He is the author of 2 books published by Amadeus Press, The Artist as Citizen, 2005, and American Muse, The Life and Times of William Schuman in 2008. Dr. Polisi's 33 years at Juilliard have been a time of vitality for the school, with the establishment of new student services and alumni programs, a revised curriculum, and an emphasis on the humanities and liberal arts. In 2010, he founded Juilliard Global, a program to bring Juilliard expertise to selected sites around the world. Following several years of development, in 2014, he founded Juilliard Global Ventures, a major initiative to provide access to Juilliard education in new geographies and for a wide array of learners through site-based and digital education. A major component of this initiative is in the Tianjin Juilliard School, a branch campus for which Juilliard has received authorization from the Chinese Ministry of Education to open in 2019. Joseph, tell me, you've traveled to China multiple times as part of these initiatives. What have been some of your most memorable experiences?
Well, I think, Tony, for myself as an arts educator, but trained as a musician, the most extraordinary thing is to see the great commitment and talent that's involved with the performance of Western art music in China. There are, I'm told, over 50 million children studying piano alone in China, and these are extraordinary numbers. And I think, most important, the respect that one sees for the study of music in a serious way and its impact on how young children really grow, not only artistically but intellectually, is quite exceptional. So for me, China is an extraordinary environment for support of classical music, and music is of all types for that matter.
You hold degrees, as I mentioned in the introduction, in both political science and international relation, as well as advanced degrees in music. So how has this varied background of your education contributed to your worldview?
I think when I was at Fletcher, at your university at Tufts, I was given this extraordinary opportunity to see broad-based activities involved in geopolitical strategies. But when I eventually came to my discipline in music, I could see how music could have an impact through cultural diplomacy and so-called soft power. And especially in this day and age, I think there's so much communication of a true and real way that can make individuals in various countries understand our common humanity. And that's what I've seen coming out of the arts. But with my training in international relations, I can also see how one can combine the two in order to have better interaction between individuals from various countries.
And more specifically, how has this shaped your vision for Juilliard's expansion internationally?
Juilliard has always been an international institution. On average, we've had about 30% of our students coming from outside of the United States. But we haven't been a global institution in the sense that we reach out to countries beyond New York City. We always expected people to come to us. And that's what Juilliard Global Ventures is all about, and our branch campus in Tianjin, China. It's the first time that we will actually have the opportunity to offer degrees, in this case a Master of Music, outside of New York City. We also work with Nord Anglia Education, which is a K-12 educational network involved with close to 45,000 children around the world, where we provide the performing arts curriculum in music, dance, and drama. So for us, it's been really an eye-opener to see how individuals relate to Juilliard and how we relate to individuals outside of New York City.
So what impact do you think that the performing arts can have on international relations and diplomacy? And maybe more specifically, how could that be a bridge between the U.S. and China?
As I said earlier, I believe deeply in the power of cultural diplomacy, or so-called soft power, where various citizens of countries can experience the arts and all of the values that come along with those arts. I believe deeply that drama, dance, and music, the visual arts, and other arts in particular, represent values like empathy, compassion, joy, that are not necessarily associated with statescraft or individual geopolitical interests. So if you take a youth orchestra from the United States, of young Americans, and send them to the People's Republic of China, and they perform for audiences around that country, they're going to see a different type of America from what they might see or have seen through mass media.
Tell us more about Juilliard Global Ventures. How did it get started? What have been some of the challenges and some of the outcomes?
After the results of the 08-09 recession, the chairman of our board, Bruce Kovner, and I had a very important discussion about where we wanted the institution to go, because the entire landscape, as you know, had changed so significantly, certainly financially, but otherwise as well. And we saw that Juilliard had a so-called global brand, that individuals around the world knew about the school, but not in any great detail. So we decided to explore what ventures made sense. The idea of a branch campus was always something that was probably first in our discussions because it was perhaps closest to our mission. And we looked at various countries in East Asia, in Europe, in South America, and we came upon Tianjin, China as our best partner, and we've been delighted that that's happened. And then we also saw that there were opportunities for Juilliard to bring our values and our approach to how we teach the arts to children in particular throughout the world. And that we've done through the Nord Anglia Association. So we're continuing to see where we can have an impact, where we can curate, for example, performance programs in various parts of the world that may need our expertise. And we found as a result that we give great opportunities to our faculty, to our alumni, to our students, to be involved in these projects. It's been very exciting.
How do you think this venture is increasing access to music or to cross-cultural relationships?
Oh, I think that the whole idea of the venture is that we bring our, in this case, musical values to China or to the rest of the world, and they see differences and similarities. For example, at Juilliard, there's a tremendous commitment to the performance and study of chamber music. We believe that you really can't be a functioning musician without being a strong chamber musician. And we have found that in China, that emphasis is not as great as we have here at school. So we are emphasizing that, and we're finding that there's great receptivity to that approach. The same story with orchestral tradition. China has many wonderful professional and student orchestras. There are different traditions about how they perform, and our idea is to go there and share those ideas and merge concepts so that we have a different experience than we had started, but that perhaps is more impactful and more nuanced in a lot of ways.
So do you think that this venture will change attitudes in both countries about each other's musical arts and traditions?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the hope is that we'll be able to take students from our campus in Tianjin and bring them to New York, and vice versa, bring our students from New York and go to China. Our faculty in Tianjin will be composed of a brand new faculty of international artists and teachers. And not only will they teach, but they will be put together as an ensemble and tour all of East Asia, representing the best values, we hope, of what Juilliard is all about. It's a little bit of a reflection of what happened in 1946, when the then president, William Shubin, the gentleman whose biography I wrote, created the Juilliard String Quartet. And the idea there was that a quartet of strings would be put together, the Juilliard name would be on that, and then they would tour the world representing the best of Juilliard. And that turned out to be a colossal success, as Bill Schumann would say.
So at Tufts, Chinese students are our biggest international group. Is that the same at Juilliard?
It's exactly the same
and
at
how
Juilliard.
did that fix you on which part of the world you wanted to expand into?
Well, the two largest international components that we've had traditionally, I would say over the past 30 to 40 years, was first of all South Korea, students from South Korea. And then, of course, in more recent times, the past 15 years or so, students from Greater China. And we therefore thought this was a natural environment through which we could explore the idea of a branch campus. And as I said, we looked in South Korea, we looked in Japan a little bit, we looked in other areas of Southeast Asia, but we found an ideal partner in Tianjin because of the development area that they're involved in outside of the city, in Ujiapu, in the Binhai district, which is a very large development area. I would say somewhat akin to what Pudong was about 25 years ago. And will be one of the arts activities, arts centers in that new development area. So it's a very exciting prospect.
And how will the Juilliard School there be interacting with regional and national conservatories?
Oh, well, that's an extremely important point. We come to China with the idea of being a good colleague and seeing only complementary activities. So, for example, we might provide master classes in Tianjin with international artists who would be coming from Juilliard or who were invited by us. And we would invite students from, of course, our partner, the Tianjin Conservatory, but also the Central Conservatory, the Shanghai Conservatory, conservatories all over China. We would have conferences, performances, festivals. We would hope to be a type of thought center for the study of music. We are developing for the first time, I think to our knowledge, a digital music library. Since we can't replicate all of the extraordinary scores we have in New York City, we are going to digitize as many of them as can be digitized, and we'll be using many times iPads and other vehicles, digital vehicles, to play the music, whether in performance, in orchestras, or in studies. So it's a whole new, brave new world that we're involved with. And also, I think, for scholars, this will be an important center where we'll have resources that currently don't exactly exist in China.
As the world becomes more globalized and interconnected and multicultural, how do you think music education will follow in that trajectory? Also, what is the role of online learning in music education?
Right. I think once we solve the problems technically, logistically of online education, that will be really the way music is probably taught in the future. In other words, one of the limitations of someone who lives either in distant parts of the United States or in China or other countries is that they don't have access to teachers at the level that are necessary to really grow correctly. Obviously not just in music, but in a whole series of topics. We have already done a good deal of experimentation, and we see that one can have very, very effective interaction between teacher and student in the teaching of musical instruments. And that's something that I think will definitely be the future down the line in music education. So, for example, if we need to teach clarinet in the school system in Topeka, Kansas, we can do it online. And I think it'll have a big impact on the quality of the experience and on the opportunity for a much larger population to experience that. And I think that's just one of the larger issues for music education in general. I think in the United States, we simply, at the moment, have not supported music education in the K through 12 arena enough. And what one sees in the States is a rather spotty environment where there are extraordinary programs and then one sees lesser activities. I think in China, there's in fact a stronger network of K through 12 education in music. And we'd love to link into that and to explore their best practices and ours to develop new approaches.
So what are some of your biggest challenges? What keeps you up at night about this whole project?
Right. Well, we want the very, very best students to apply and to enroll. And we're very used to the cycle at Juilliard, New York. It will be brand new in Juilliard, China. So, I'm concerned that Chinese students and East Asian students and international students, for that matter, know about the program and would be attracted to it and find it engaging. Then once we get everybody in the building, we want to be sure that we can put together ensembles and classes that make sense. We're actually teaching in English, which is something we studied quite clearly. And that was the desire for an international institution, for Chinese students at least, was that they learn English and it become part of the educational process. We've always had wonderful Chinese students coming to America with appropriate TOEFL scores and who can function in New York in English. We have to make sure that that exists in China as well. There's also the idea that we want the public to come to this building. The building that has been designed by our architects, Stiller, Scofidio, and Renfro, who worked with us here in New York City, is a, in my opinion, an architectural destination. So we want the public to come in to experience Juilliard Imagination, which is this large, mostly digital space where individuals can understand how the arts of drama, dance, and music work, and other activities that will be attractive to them, including probably close to 200 concerts a year. So we're very close to the high-speed rail terminus in Ujiapu, 500 meters away, and you could easily get to our school from Beijing, South Station, in less than an hour. So we're hoping that there'll be a large influx of people.
So one of the biggest attractions to American higher education is, for many, the residential campus community experience. So not only are you taking classes with your fellow students, you're living in the dorms, you're involved in a lot of co-curricular activities. And I know Juilliard has that, that reputation here in New York. How do you want to try to replicate that community feel of a residential campus with the Juilliard venture?
Well, you're absolutely right, Tony. I think that having a residential tower or area where students can come after they've been studying and just be young people is so important. And we are going to have a residence hall that will house probably close to all of our 200 students in the master's program at least, and some of our pre-college students as well. And within that idea, we'll have all sorts of community activities, which is also something I think that's very much an American tradition. So with that, I think that our students in Tianjin will be instilled with Juilliard values that they may not have been able to address otherwise.
And what aspects of the performing arts scholarship are you trying to develop there with particular areas of research or scholarship related to the arts?
Since this will be a graduate program for instrumentalists, they'll be taking music history and music theory courses taught by very qualified teachers who are also scholars and researchers. But I think we're also planning very much to create a digital center for Western art music in our facility that really will be a destination for scholars in East Asia, where we could not only provide them with research materials. For example, we have a very extraordinary collection of first editions and original manuscripts of music here in New York City. That entire collection is digitized and can be seen online, and certainly would be seen online in China. So with that said, we can have the opportunity to bring scholars to the Tianjin Juilliard School to have symposia and workshops and special presentations that in our particular strength relate to scholarship and performance, which is what we do here in New York City. But the digital media will be our saving grace, so to speak.
Given that you'll be teaching in English, do you actually hope that it'll draw from a much larger region of Asia, even Australia, Korea, South Korea? Would you expect students to be applying to the school from other countries in the region? Yes,
I'm often asked, will this just be for Chinese students? And that's not the idea. We've always talked about East Asia, but for that matter, an American student living in Chicago could apply to Juilliard in China. For whatever reason, there may be reasons that they want to do that. So yes, we see a very international population. What that will be ultimately, still remains to be seen. And we'll be opening, I should mention, in September 2019. So we have a little bit of lead time.
And will you be offering financial aid to students? Under what mechanism will you be assessing students' needs?
We are going to try to mirror the financial aid experience in terms of procedure and evaluation that we have in New York. And so individuals who have very high merit based on their auditions and who have high need will receive significant scholarship assistance. We have to continue to develop those scholarship resources in China, since we won't be using those resources that we have here in New York. The running of the two institutions are, in that sense, separate. So we will be raising money in both the United States and China for scholarship assistance.
I imagine that this venture has captured the imagination of many people, of Juilliard brand being expanded internationally. What interest have you gotten from both Chinese, American, or other donors who want to support such an effort because they think it's important for cross-cultural diplomacy, even between the U.S. and China?
I think that the curiosity about the venture has been, first of all, that we will be the first American Conservatory of the Arts to actually have a branch in China. And as you know so well, China has many, many international corporations that are centered there, as well as Chinese corporations, of course. And we hope that the idea will be that some of these corporations will see the idea of nurturing interchange between our two countries through the support of arts education. And that philanthropy, which is a comparatively new venture in China, will continue to grow and flourish.
If it's successful, will Juilliard have a vision, do you think, of creating a third somewhere else? A third campus? Is that on the cards?
It's not in my cards.
Yes, I know that.
I'm going to work on making China successful, and I'm sure I'll wish my successor well in figuring out where number 3 would be. But but right now we're putting all of our efforts, and concentration, time into making this a success.
And what things have you learned through this process? What has surprised you about trying to set this up?
Well, you know, Tony, you mentioned that I was a political science major, and then of course went to Fletcher in international relations. And in those days, communist studies were the hot issue because it was the Cold War. And so my master's thesis, or longest paper for that matter, was on Sino-Soviet competition in Tanzania in 1964. So I was always thinking about China. And it's always been a great interest of mine. And now that I've learned so much about the country, I've learned about its energy, its openness, its willingness to take chances, its flexibility, its honesty, because there are a lot of misconceptions about China if you just read newspapers. But all the things I've just said, I believe very deeply. And the partners we have in our project have just been fantastic. Smart, generous, open, and I've learned you know, just how much I appreciate China and respect you know, their basic values.
So individuals such as Wang Jian, Li Yundi, and Lang Lang are highly regarded Chinese classical musicians. Do you think the next musical prodigy will come from the Juilliard's China campus?
The search for prodigies is actually the easy part. A prodigy pops out right away. So one never knows where they're going to appear, though. And of course, once you identify the prodigy, then you have to make sure that the growth of that young musician, let's say, is matched by their growth as young adults, so that they have all of the not only artistic skills but the mature intellectual and psychological skills to have a successful career. But the real work of a serious conservatory is bringing every student who comes into the institution up to a new and higher level of excellence. You know, at Juilliard, I always say that we're as good as our last performance. As soon as we have achieved something, the next morning we're back in the practice room trying to get better. And I know that's the case in in many other disciplines as well in great institutions like Tufts. But excellence is a direction, it's not a place. And I think that's going to be that is the environment at Juilliard, and we hope we can pass that on to the environment at the Tianjin Juilliard School as well.
So there's a lot of evidence that early musical education is a key factor in language acquisition. And as we were discussing earlier, there's a large increase in America of students wanting to learn Chinese. Do you think there's great value in pursuing both?
Absolutely. First of all, yes, you're absolutely right. There are correlations that have been studied for individuals who have strong language skills tend to have strong musical skills. But I would even say more important, I studied in France, for example, in my junior year abroad, and then one more year after that, and I became fluent in French. And I began to understand the French people in a completely different way when I spoke their language. And there's interactions that are spontaneous, senses of humor, approaches to all sorts of things that one does when you have the original language that you're both communicating with. So I think if it's possible to learn Mandarin, for example, in a large portion of our public school education side and private schools, it would be so much more beneficial for the relationship between China and the United States. We would understand ourselves better.
The Confucius Institutes, which Tufts is participating in, have really promoted language acquisition for students both in our universities and some of our local schools, as well as cultural understanding. I think it's been a very highly successful. How important from your perspective, do you think these types of language instructional programs and educational exchanges are for young people?
I think they're absolutely invaluable. I mean, you can deal with all the formulas and approaches to whether it's mathematics or science or the studying of history, but until you really get involved in the texture of the people, you really don't understand on that side what interrelationships are all about. I think it's so important that Americans broaden their view of the world and not be parochial in their view of the world or U.S.-centric. That's such an incredible danger. The history of America, until recent times, has been one of an isolationist nation. And I think that's one of our proclivities, to go back to isolationism. We've got to avoid that at all costs. And the work of the Confucius Institute allows us to explore other cultures, other languages, other points of view. And this is just invaluable to not only human growth, but I think to our relationships as two major global powers.
And from your perspective, what advice would you give to those of us that are working with Confucius Institutes? How could we have even more positive outcomes?
Well, I've found that there's enormous openness to exchanges in China and the resources to make them happen, and vice versa. So one thing I would suggest is if there's just ways of bringing Chinese students who would ordinarily not be coming to the States for short periods of time. 10 days is short period, but it's enough to absorb things, and then to have an intensive experience for those individuals. For example, Juilliard will have our annual Contemporary Music Festival in January 18, which we've been doing for the past 34 years. But this year it'll be focused on music of China, contemporary music of China. And we have commissioned 7 younger Chinese composers to write chamber music pieces that will be performed at the festival. And we're hoping that those 7 composers can come to the United States, meet our student composers, meet our faculty, hear their music being performed, work with the performers who are doing it, give them suggestions. It'll be such a revelatory experience for both sides. And that's the sort of thing I think that works well and is comparatively easy to do.
We also have a study abroad program in China at Tufts, and Beijing Normal University, which is our partner for our Confucius Institute, is working with us to bring some of those study abroad students in for the summer so they can experience Beijing Normal, which has been very positive for them.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
more of these exchanges and time spent on other campuses, I think, is very, very valuable.
Absolutely.
Through our Confucius Institute, of course, we do a lot of programs with our own students in one-on-one tutoring for Chinese language, and we are leading on some symposium to bring other teachers in and others involved in Chinese language teaching. But one of the most important programs is the Confucius Institute is helping one of our local schools with students on getting early attention to Chinese language. In your vision for the Juilliard campus in China, tell us a bit more about how they will be working with school children and local teachers to advance musical appreciation.
Well, one of the things I think which will be new for China is something we do all the time here at Juilliard, and that is so-called community outreach. Close to 65–70% of our students on a weekly basis do performances in the New York area in hospitals, hospices, nursing homes, schools. And we found that what happens with our young artists who do it is not that they just are very effective performers for the audiences in these non-traditional venues, but they grow as communicators and artists. They really understand better their power as artists. So what we're planning to do in China is to make it a requirement that our 200 students or so in our master's program on a weekly basis will be going into schools, community centers, etc., in Tianjin, in Yujiapu, and working with children, working with senior citizens. This is, I think, going to be a new experience for everybody, and there'll be training so that they understand how to approach all of this. But the basic idea, as I've said so often, is that an artist is a communicator. He or she is not just a technician. And when they communicate ideas, their audiences change. We hope change for the better. And invariably, we see that the most communicative artists are the ones that don't have any borders, are non-traditional, and are especially strong in non-traditional venues. So I hope that's going to happen in China. It's a different way of thinking about how you approach your art.
We also believe strongly in the value of civic engagement as part of the educational process. So about 45% of our students will have a significant experience working in our local communities with partners on different projects. We also know that this is a worldwide effort. This is not specific to the U.S., and many universities, particularly in the global South, have significant commitments to working with their communities. Many of those communities look to the universities for services, for access to things that they can't get for other reasons. In China, I would know that there's interest in this area. So do many of the Chinese universities there have similar civic engagement programs, or is this something new that Juilliard would be bringing?
I'm not sure in terms of the university settings. And I think in terms of some of the larger conservatories, the national conservatories, I think there is a bit of outreach done. I don't know if it's required and if it's viewed in the way we're viewing it, of actually enhancing the artistic experience for the young artist. But you know, this is one of the wonderful points you bring up. This is all an exploration. You know, we have to listen to them and they have to listen to us. There's nothing set in stone. And I think that's one of our approaches, that we're going to China with, we believe, a very open mind. And we want to listen, and we want to see where the needs really are, and then respond.
And do you think between the Juilliard initiative, and I know many other universities are setting up campuses in China, that this is just the beginning, that there's going to be a wave in the future of these, or do you think this will plateau for a while?
That's hard to say for sure. These type of arrangements, of course, fundamentally hinge on the relationship of the United States to China politically. And I don't think anybody can predict what that would be at the moment, except we hope for good things. And I think with good, robust diplomatic relations between the two countries, I'm absolutely sure that more American institutions will explore ways of going into China in different ways. It may be a study institute. It may not be always granting a degree, but I think there'll be more presence for sure. Yeah.
We certainly are seeing no stoppage of the interest in Chinese students to come to America. That, I imagine, at Juilliard and certainly at Tufts and many other higher education institutions has been the largest growth in applications. So, you know, the interest is there, and you know, be curious to see if that continues going forward at such a brisk pace.
I know. I think it's hard to believe that it could go faster. So I think there probably will be a leveling off at some point. But we are a global environment now, and to deny that, I think, would be foolish and unnecessary. So I think it's fantastic that the president of China, Xi Jinping, studied for a little while in Iowa, and he has fond memories of that environment, and I think the people that he knew now he's seeing again, and those are the type of relationships that were so valuable.
In my own experience in the sciences, particularly at the graduate level and postdoctoral level, students who come from other countries, when they go back and they set up their own you know, labs and initiatives, the collaborations continue, the relationships continue, and they continue for decades. So I think this exchange of people will have really long-term value to both countries in setting up collaborations that are important in solving some of the big challenges we face as a society, whether that's health-related, climate change-related, and I'm sure the same is true from these music programs. Absolutely. The relationships there will last much longer than the time of the exchange.
And I think the Confucius Institute provides an infrastructure, you know, in many ways for that to happen, which is wonderful.
We talked earlier about the importance of soft power in promoting a better understanding between countries, particularly those like China and the U.S., which have a lot of issues they're trying to deal with, both politically or in their respective regions. So what role do you think music, which knows no boundaries as a performing art, what role do you think that has in that soft power array of ways of communicating?
Well, I think if you were talking to an advocate for realpolitik and the idea of hard power, you know, the concept of music making a difference in relations between countries would perhaps not be picked up with alacrity. But since I'm a musician and not necessarily an advocate for realpolitik, I would just simply say that I have seen over and over and over again that the relationships of individuals, if enough of them happen, make a difference in how countries interact. And there's no question that I think that the most important relationship that the United States has with any other country is with China. The strategic and geopolitical issues that we share and have to be resolved in so many different ways. And music is only one of hundreds of opportunities or human interactions that can be brought forward. You mentioned sciences before, climate control, which are issues that we're grappling with right now. But I think that music, dance, drama represent the best, or can represent the best of human values, and can make individuals understand the differences between two societies in an effective way that couldn't be done through straight speech, so to speak. And so that's my feeling, that, you know, it's been quoted by so many others, from Eleanor Roosevelt on up to John F. Kennedy, but, you know, it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness, so to speak. And that's my attitude. If we can keep working in a direction where we're interacting, we're understanding each other, Look, when the New York Philharmonic went to North Korea a few years ago, there were real questions about whether that was appropriate or not. And it was clearly a soft power approach. And I'm not going to debate whether it was right or wrong, but the New York Philharmonic members, many of them are members of our faculty. And I asked them, I said, what was it like there? And there were all sorts of responses, but the one thing they did say that was consistent and very touching was, as an encore, the Philharmonic played an arrangement of a Korean folk song, a folk song that's known both in the South and in the North. And they sensed there was a palpable difference in the hall when they played that folk song. In other words, there was a real effort on the part of these visitors, American visitors, to share some values with their audience. And that's the sort of power I think we're talking about. You never know when it's going to succeed, but you better try it, because there's no reason to expect that it's going to fail.
Well, it certainly helps build trust, and I think trust is an important ingredient to
Right.
much of the diplomacy we will try to achieve at the political level. So I think it's a great place to start. We talked about the value of youth orchestras and participation by young people in and visiting other countries to show their talents. What value do you think there is in maybe a combined youth orchestra between the U.S. and China, and even maybe thinking a bit broader in the region? Could there be exchanges which even bring a multicultural set of students together?
Well, that's a great question and a great idea. In fact, as we speak, we just completed a tour of the Juilliard Orchestra and the Sibelius Academy Orchestra that merged to do concerts in Helsinki and Stockholm and now in New York as part of the 100th anniversary of the founding of Finland. So that idea of bringing musicians together and playing together is so powerful. They become friends, they listen to each other. It's really a great idea. There is a U.S. youth orchestra that is sponsored by Clive Gillinson, the wonderful executive director of Carnegie Hall. And he was able to bring over to Carnegie just this past summer a Chinese youth orchestra. Now, they didn't exactly play together, but they were almost on the same day that they were performing. So these type of exchanges are fantastic. And especially when you're a 16-year-old and 18-year-old and you're experiencing this for the first time, it's invaluable. So yes, I think those are the opportunities that once we're on the ground, I think we'll be able to really explore effectively.
Well, thank you, Joseph, for such a great dialogue about your worldview and how that's been shaped by your study of international relations as well as music, and in particular, your incredible venture in the Juilliard School in China. So we look forward to hearing of its great success in the future.
Well, my great honor having the chance to share some with you. Thank you.
The real focus of this program is to recognize outstanding young people and some not so young people, 10 individuals who exemplify the mission of the Confucius Institute. And that mission is dedicated to the teaching of Mandarin, the development of additional cultural awareness about China.
We have 10 exemplary students representing the vast diversity of the students body of Confucius Institutes all over the country.
To all of the honorees tonight, congratulations. You really, really, really deserve it.
But it's not just your knowledge of the language and the culture, it's actually the special spirit that inspires you to do this. And that is really through difficult times. Things are not always easy, I know, even at your young age. And these difficult challenges that you've overcome in order to keep this going really require a certain quality of person to do this.
If we in America are going to compete on the global platform, we need everybody in this room, and we need more than everybody in this room to be able to feel comfortable in a different culture, in a different context. And many of us here have the fortune to grow up. We grow up with Spanish-speaking people around us. We grow up with all different kinds of people. But there are not that many people who really feel comfortable in a Chinese context and a Chinese environment. And I hope that each one of you in this room knows how lucky you are to have a Confucius Institute as a bridge to help you to feel that comfort and know that, like we heard some of the students saying, it's people. And people need to relate on a human basis. And when you feel comfortable human to human, people to people, you're going to be a huge success.
My mantra, my number one belief is that there is nothing better than engagement. That's the way I live. If you are engaged in a common mission with the people with whom you work throughout the world, no one can stop you.
We need everybody in this room. We need all of you to take your language and your cultural aptitude and your interest and to combine it with whatever other skill that you're doing. I don't care if it's accounting, I don't care if it's PR, I don't care if it's medicine. Put the two together and help the world connect.
They are extraordinary young people, and they all have a common thread. Through learning this new language, a whole new world has opened up to them. They see our world in a different way. And not just China. I'm talking about the global community. They're remarkable people, young and old, and I'm very proud to introduce them to you tonight.
Americans should learn Chinese because America and China are so connected in economy and trade, and in our daily lives, China affects a lot of what we do.
Having a strong relationship between these two countries is critical, and to do so, we have to be able to have these exchanges, and not just amongst the major leaders. It doesn't just need to be the presidents of both nations meeting. It needs to be the everyday citizens learning more about each other.
The East and the West both have different values, and both of them can combine to create something even more powerful.
Both countries can benefit from each other, and China plays a large role in America's economy and culture. So it would help them fully, if they learn the language, it would help them with communicating further.
We could solve issues a lot better together by working together and learning how to communicate together as opposed to individually. So I think the sum of us together is way better than us individually.
Americans should learn Chinese just so they're not sitting in their little corner of the world.
It's really easy to put the blinders on and not really pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the world, but we all have phones. Technology keeps us so interconnected that you almost can't afford not to pay attention to what happens outside of the United States.
It's one thing to go to a place like visit China, but it's another to be able to interact with the people in their own language.
Being involved in a Confucius classroom has really given me more of an understanding of not only a language, but a culture. And I've spent the past 6 or so years really immersing myself in Chinese, from the classroom to the field trips to the music to the people. And I want to major in international relations, and a lot of that is because of the experiences that I've had in my Confucius classroom.
Being a part of the Confucius Institute or classroom has impacted what I'm interested in, because I've just seen a whole new world open up in front of me as I've learned a new language and a new culture.
One of my most memorable experiences was a year ago attending a concert sponsored by the Confucius Institute at Portland State University. It was a performance of Gucheng and Pipa, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've seen and heard, and that's just so memorable to me.
Every single day that I walk into the Confucius classroom, and it can be the little things like writing little brief skits just to practice our Chinese language, or singing the cheesy songs that my teacher pulls up. I think that just that every day of experience of being able to sort of be immersed in an entirely new culture for 90 minutes every class period. It's just great because it's not something that I have the opportunity to do outside of my classroom. My family doesn't speak Chinese. I only have like 1 or 2 friends that also speak and study the language. So I think just being able to be immersed in that culture and know that I am learning about something that is entirely different to my own experiences. I'm really expanding my viewpoint in every single sense.
I would just say, just jump right in and start learning. And you can do it, especially when you have things like the Confucius Institute behind you.
My favorite aspect of my Confucius classroom is my teacher, Li Laoshi, and I've had her for all 4 years, and she's become like a parent to us, and I really appreciate her as a person because she takes our language learning and she gives it so much more life. We learn about her life in China before she came here, we learn about her children, we learn about her life, and she's really become part of our Confucius family.
Before I was in the Confucius Institute, I was just taking Mandarin lessons from a private teacher. So once I joined, I noticed a variety of classes ranging from Tai Chi to cooking, and it was really helpful because you can't learn a language in a vacuum. You need a community that understands how to speak the language to help you, and it's really important that it exists.
It's such a big world and such a diverse world, and there's so much that, at least for me, I don't even know what I don't know. And so by having educational cross-cultural experiences, I think it helps us broaden our horizons, it helps us deepen our understandings, and it helps us build connections with people.
This fall, my family and I were fortunate to be able to spend almost a month in China. Being able to visit China and speak to other middle schoolers entirely in Mandarin is something I never could have imagined a few years ago. It all happened because of my friends at the Confucius Institute at William and Mary College. I shared my experiences growing up in the U.S., and the Chinese students shared their experiences growing up in China. I asked them what they would like people in America to know about middle schoolers in China. Can you guess what all of the kids wanted us to know? Like kids everywhere, they all shouted out homework. They said that they have way too much homework and not enough time for social and fun activities. They seem to think that American kids just have fun all the time. This is not true, by the way.
So what I really want to do is raise my hand and raise a toast to everybody here and to say thank you so much for getting it. Thank you so much for being part of this and understanding it and to help us achieve what's going to be so important for the people that follow us.